All right, Mike, welcome to the Founding AE pod. Super excited to have you on.
So stoked. Yeah, excited. Let's chat.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. I think I just mentioned this to you right before we started here. When I was thinking of launching this pod, you were one of the first people that came to my mind. We met probably like a year ago, right? And the moment I met you, I was like, this guy is an early stage sales guy. Like I could see it in and out. And obviously, having the opportunity to work with you as a customer of ours, you've definitely shown that you have this special skill and passion that is required.
Special in quotations. Yeah.
Well, you're torn from the same cloth as I think myself and George, my co-founder. So I'm really excited to dig in and hear all about what you're doing over there at StackPack. But maybe for those that are listening in and aren't familiar with you, maybe you can give us a little bit about your background, your career, and how you ended up being a founding sales lead.
Yeah, happy to. Huge fan of the AssetMule team, by the way. You all were a guiding light in my first couple months, so I'm happy to talk about that more. Uh, Definitely a great tool. So yeah, I think like as you get through your career or a couple jobs in, I feel like everyone's trying to figure out what the through line is. Like what's the story they can tell about how all these jobs actually make sense when they're lined up and aren't just like falling backwards into different roles. Um, but for me, so I started my career in nonprofit, and I think the big through line for me is problem solving. I was very interested in solving these very complex problems in a very community oriented way. And so with my skill set and the way that I kind of went about it was always through fundraising and sales, was bringing people into this idea of like, we're all going to solve this problem together. So when I was in nonprofit at United Way and a great nonprofit called MoneyThink, it was really focused on community problems, homelessness, hunger. At MoneyThink, it was post-secondary education, solving those problems and getting people to buy into the idea of like, oh yeah, we do need to solve this, or we should solve this, and this is the solution that's going to get us there. And then the jump for me into startup really came from I was leaving the nonprofit space, was looking for something that was going to be a little bit more. I was always fascinated by like the startup world, and had the opportunity to go work at a student loan startup. It was focused on solving that problem, just that tiny problem of student loans in America and the crisis they're in. And so I had a really great opportunity to work there, and that's really what kicked off my more traditional sales experience, is going into that sort of realm of VC backed. And then I jumped from there to Tandem, another early stage startup, where that was my first experience really running that founding AE role. And now at StackPack, where I'm doing much of the same. So I always joke, like there can't possibly be that much more gas in the tank to do this all over again. But I also feel like you resonate with, as soon as the problem is there and it's something to solve, it's like, I could probably do like one or two more. Why not? So
Totally. I that totally resonates with me. It even within this role that I'm in right now, you have moments where you're like, man, I am exhausted. Like, I don't know if I can keep going forward. And then suddenly something happens, like you get a good email from a prospect or whatever, a great demo, and you're like totally energized again and just back at it. So
oh,
I think
it's
that's
such a pain. It's such a like we require so little. Like it's like a couple closed deals, and all of a sudden like that's the best thing in the world. I totally hear you. That's both the gift and the curse of this role.
And what's interesting, you mentioned the nonprofit background. Adam O'Brien, your new marketer, I guess not so new now, a couple of months in, is also from that background. So maybe there's something there too. I don't know. Folks that come from that background have that drive, that passion, sort of that bigger mission that they're going after, whether they're doing it at a nonprofit or sorry, I guess in his case, maybe the same as you, as tech companies selling into nonprofits, but tech for good, right?
Yeah.
Or startups, right? It's the bigger mission that pulls you, I think.
I think it's like if this podcast were an hour longer, this is my like big TED talk, I think, that I'll get to. But it's essentially early stage startup and nonprofits are very similar in the sense that if as a founding AE you no longer resonate with the mission or that the product is working, you're not going to be good at your job. Like I can't go to you and try to sell you on the idea of like ending homelessness if I no longer believe that what I'm doing is actually going to solve that problem. The same thing in early stage. It's so like belief driven.
Yeah.
that you're not good at convincing people to get on board if you yourself aren't fully committed to the idea or the dream or the vision. So I think it's a really strong parallel between those two types of opportunities. And yeah, Adam and I have talked about that. He's the man. We'll talk about him later. But
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. Well, one thing I wanted to chat about is I think when we first met, you were actually just starting at StackPack, and I got to see firsthand you get up to speed super quickly, start making an impact. I saw on LinkedIn all these new customers you were bringing on board and all that stuff. So I wanted to pick your brain on that first sort of like 30, 60, 90 days. Like you join a big company, you've got the time to onboard and to go through the trainings and all that stuff. When you're at a startup, especially when you're the first salesperson, you got to hit the ground running and start delivering impact immediately. So I saw you do that. How did you do that? How did you structure sort of your approach to onboarding and making an impact as fast as possible?
Yeah, I have a dream that someday I too will have like a 30-day onboarding period where I just get to kind of like learn and absorb, and there isn't a fire hose involved. But yeah, in StackPack, and I think at the last couple startups I've been at, the first 30 days for me, it's like a race to make an impact in a way that isn't derailing anything that's already happening. And so a couple of things that I did when I came on is, it depends on the startup, obviously, but like we were tracking so much of our stuff. Our founder, Sarah, was doing a great job of having conversations, learning about the problem space, learning about the product people wanted to see. All of these notes were in Notion. Like they weren't actually structured in any kind of CRM, or like there was no pipeline of how things were happening. And so very quickly, it was just like, how do I get structured and organized in a way that makes sense for me and allows me to do my job in a more efficient way? So identifying those early tools was a big thing. This is a classic one, but like listening to as many demos as possible was so important. And just getting a sense for like, what are the questions? Where's pushback? How does the founder talk about the problem? And then going from that to like, I record myself talking. This isn't vanity, I promise. But like, I record myself doing demos all the time. I still do it. Like, I think it's an ongoing just learning process of getting better at it. And especially early on, I always think of it as like nailing these little talk tracks so that when you're having a conversation with someone, you can kind of like fall back on, oh yeah, here's when I say these 3 sentences. And that's what this sounds like. And it gets me back into a groove, especially early when you're like, I don't know what I'm talking about as well as I will in a couple days from now or a week or 2 from now. And so getting comfortable talking about the product and those specific elements, that was really critical for me as well. And then the last thing I would say that was really helpful was I built a Q&A doc moving into a space, especially when it's a new sort of vertical that you're not familiar with. Like I had never worked in vendor and contract management. So understanding what questions I had about the product and then what questions I could tell other people had about the product. And that was just like telling family members and friends what I was doing, being like, what doesn't make sense about this to you? Getting that document vetted by our product and engineering team and by Sarah, by our founder, that was really important too. Just being able to talk about everything more intelligently without being like, every other question, like, I should go back and ask our product team about that. I think being able to establish that credibility on that first call to me is very important. And so those are sort of the main things. I think it all kind of goes back to getting more comfortable and confident within that first sort of 30-day period. But really like 31 to 60, taking sales calls by myself, like you kind of had to get there. I think that's probably a common thing for this role, is like, you really can't take very long to onboard. You got to be figuring out the different ways to add value through your unique lens. So yeah, I'm curious, like you've done this a million times. How do those resonate with you? Like, is it
Totally resonates. Like, as you were saying, listening in and picking up those little positioning statements or ways of describing the product or how to handle certain objections that come up frequently. I was thinking back to when I first was in the founding AE role or the founding sales role. And That's totally what I was doing, is like documenting that stuff. Same thing on the tools side. I'm also a very like, I tend to be a more structured sort of salesperson. Like I like a process. So making sure that I had the tools. I think if I think back, we had the tools already in place. Not all of them, but definitely like the CRM in place. And it was more about setting it up in the way that I want to use it and making sure that I had my process down.
Yeah.
Maybe what I didn't do enough, which is an important thing that you mentioned. That is a hard thing to do, is listen to your own calls. And
Yeah.
again, I didn't know, I didn't take it as vanity at all. I think it's super uncomfortable
Yeah.
to listen to your own calls. So that's something that maybe I think is a really, really good tip, to continue to improve and find out where those gaps that you need to fill, right? With that Q&A doc and sort of the language, that you can absorb from people around you. You mentioned tools. So CRM, I think, is kind of the obvious one, right? Like for a salesperson to get started. What are some of
Yeah.
the other tools that you brought on really early, and what are some tools that you've brought on even since then that have become critical for you in your day to day? And what are some others that are nice to haves? Maybe you use them every once in a while, but they're not as critical as those kind of base ones that you use.
Yeah, I always think of like, what's my capacity to actually manage the tools that I'm using? And then you bring in the cost piece as well. And it's like, I can't really afford to have a massive vendor stack because it's really just me and maybe the founder is using it as well. Although like they're probably very familiar with their own tools and
Mhm.
they're doing a million things. And so it's like their onboarding time for a new tool is limited. So being really choosy about the tools I use and making sure they're versatile. I think that was like a key thing for me. I still think like the best outbound or like outreach or link or list building tool is still Sales Navigator.
Yeah.
It's just so much data. It's such a good way to get a sense for something that's been really important for us, this like network led outbound approach of who
Yeah.
do I know who knows someone else. Like that's still, I think, one of the most viable, valuable outreach tactics you can use today. And so having Sales Navigator as a way to structure that part, that was really important for us. And again, for me, especially early on, I didn't know who was in my network, who was potentially a good fit. And so being able to utilize some of those tools was really important. From there, I will toot the AssetMule horn because it was incredibly important for me. We like early stage, your product's changing so much. So your website is essentially a liability because the data that's on there is not really what's most up to date because no one can spend time to update it on a constant basis. So you're really just driving people there to like ideally book demos and not look too much at everything else because
Mhm.
the language that worked for them might not actually be what's reflected. Especially for us, that was tough. We found pretty quickly that people had a lot of issues with contract management, maybe less so on vendor management.
Hmm.
And so someone would go to our website and be like, oh, there's nothing on here about contract management. It's really about managing your vendors. So that was something we wanted to get out in front of and fix. And for something like AssetMule, like I was constantly tweaking language on a call basis to go on and say, okay, actually, this is what resonated. So let me move some things around, make sure that this is highlighted up top, change the call to action. Different things like that became really, really valuable just to make it seem like we weren't, not to say like making this up as we went, but that we had a good sense for what was resonating. We knew what the value add was. And at early stage, that's not always the case. Like, you talk to one person and they want this out of it. You talk to someone else, they want something else. So AssetMule was huge for us. And that also allowed us to make changes to our outbound email and use those links as opposed to pushing someone to our website. You use things like, an RB2B or a vector to get a sense for who's actually checking out these landing pages and are they viable. All of those are really helpful. And then I think two other things I would note. One that I'm bullish on because I think it's the way to go about this right now is something like based on intent signals. We're using Unify right now, which we're finding some success with. Really capturing people when they're paying attention to you. I think cold email is such a I don't know if we can swear on this, but like it's such a crapshoot. Like
Yeah.
to tone my expletives way down. Like I have so little faith in it. At this point, I think it's just brand awareness and think of it as like an ad spend. Maybe
Yeah.
someone looks at it in their inbox, maybe they don't. So like intent becomes kind of the only way to really turn someone from cold into like slightly lukewarm. Meeting them at the right moment. So that's a lot of where we've put our time, is focusing on how do I pull someone when they actually care about us and start to communicate with them where I know they actually might think we're doing something cool, or they might have a need for us. So I think those were sort of the big ones for us. And then, we've cycled through dozens of SaaSes. I'm sure you have as well. Like, I think it's also figuring out what works for you and your problem space, and the type of people you're selling into. It's all wildly different. I think we all at some point wish we were selling into a different ICP, because it always looks like it's easier to sell into like go to market or like engineering, something like that. But it's all probably the same.
Yeah, and you hit on like a point that has been coming up a lot in these conversations with early sales folks, which is the challenge of prospecting these days, right? I think like there's just so many tools and so much information, so many people doing outbound. You mentioned network-led outbound, so I want to tap into that a little bit more. But also any other, and also intent-based, I think, is another one that's really, really interesting that maybe you can speak a little bit more to. But any other channels too that have worked for you? It sounds like, from what I'm hearing, the traditional, volume-based email calls, maybe even more so. Nobody's like answering calls that are from numbers that they don't recognize. So you
Or
really
like
have to be smart.
suspiciously like their phone number, or they're all
Yeah,
all of a sudden
yeah,
like,
exactly.
I
Or
actually think this person isn't next door.
yeah, for a while, people were using the sort of
Yeah.
local based area codes, right? And that was working. But it feels like everything has its time and then sort of stops working. But some of the things you mentioned, I think are true forever, right? Like relationships and
Yeah.
intent, like catching people at the right time. So curious to hear what's worked for you from a prospecting perspective.
Yeah. I'm assuming network-led outbound. It sounds way smarter than something like I or our team could have originated on its own. Sarah certainly could have. She has the right capacity to pull that off. That's been like a piece that we keep coming back to, and I think of that in two ways. One is just getting a sense for the types of companies that we want to work with, and honestly, like we're building some of those lists just with like ChatGPT. Like, hey, pull me 20 Series A companies based in San Francisco that work in AI, and it's like, oh yeah, here you go. Here's a full list. But utilizing lists like that, or using things like Apollo to pull those types of lists, and then run them through Sales Nav and get a sense for who knows who, like who can I reach out to see if they'd be willing to make an intro. The hit rate there has just been so much higher. I think you really also get a sense for like how the practice of asking for those kinds of favors, like how do I make sure that I'm offering something in return, or you have to have confidence your product is actually making a difference. Getting feedback from those people is so critically important. And so sometimes it takes a little bit longer to build that level of trust, depending on the connection that you're going through. But that's been really, really helpful for us. It's been a big part of our referral network at StackPack, which has been really like a much bigger hit than I would have anticipated when we first launched it. Just getting people who are interested in making those types of connections, or utilizing their network to pull them into what we're doing here, has been really cool. I think that's always been a benefit of early stage, is being like, it is sort of inherently cool. Like it's very risk-takey. People who are maybe not in as risk-takey of positions are like, oh, I kind of want to be associated with that. That sounds cool. And so that is always kind of a channel that, I shouldn't say always, that's been a channel more recently that we've found a lot of success with. And then the last piece I would say, just in terms of channels that have worked for us, are in-person events. I think this is like a huge thing on LinkedIn, but it's like they are very much back. I was just in San Francisco last week for a cocktail making class. But possibly the first thing I learned is that there are not as many people drinking in San Francisco as there are in Chicago. So the culture thing definitely was potentially something to keep in mind for the next one.
Yeah.
Do like kombucha tasting or go on a hike or
Yeah, I'd go on a hike for
uh,
sure.
all healthier options.
Yeah.
So but that idea of like getting people together in a room, I think especially
Yeah.
there's like this younger crop of startup
Mhm.
leaders who are like mid to late 20s who I think kind of missed that a little bit with COVID and are really
Yeah.
excited to get back out there and build relationships and talk in person and just share like how much some of what we're doing at startup stinks and how hard it is and what are other people doing. There's this like really great sense of community. And that's been a really great channel for us as well. People are just open to having those conversations and hearing about what you're doing and offering genuine feedback. And if it's a fit, it's a fit. Like there's just so much more of an open mind at those types of when you meet people through those types of channels. So that's also been a big one for us.
Yeah, one thing that I've noticed you guys doing too, which I'm interested in learning more about, is your sort of content on social coming from you personally, right? Not just the StackPack page, but it seems like I noticed this early on as well. Anytime you signed on a new customer, you kind of had a post where you had a nice graphic with their logo, and you spoke to their use case and how they're using StackPack and kind of officially welcome them on board. And then more recently, I've noticed you guys going a little bit deeper into the ROI story behind it and like how much they're actually saving. I think you had a post recently where you talked about your first $1 million saving for a customer.
Yeah.
This I find it really really interesting. You know, people have talked for a long time about social selling, and I even remember when I was you know, an AE trying to do social selling, and it was this fine line between like sounding inauthentic and self promotional and you know, but I think you've done it really well. So curious, where did that come from? Was that something you have been doing for a while at different companies? Is that something that Sarah instilled in StackPack's culture? And how has it been working? Like, have you seen impact from doing that?
Yeah, great question. So I came from the ecom world before this, and ecom is all about like it's all FOMO. I'm
Mm.
sure someone in ecom will tell me that it's not all FOMO, but as far as I was concerned, it was. It's like what tool are you working with? What's the cool thing? There's obviously like the list of very cool brands, like who's working with them, and so putting the word out there was really important in that space to let other brands know you had some sort of authenticity or some sort of reliability as a tool. And so, and that worked gangbusters in that world. Like if you could show you were working with some of these cool brands, people really wanted to know, if nothing else, like what were you doing? And so coming over to StackPack, that felt like an easy thing to pull into this space is this idea of like, hey, we're a lower priced product. We're not going to break the bank for you to come on and use us. So it didn't feel like something where we were pushing people into really difficult conversations. It was more like, hey, is this thing useful for you? If so, the price is low and you can bring it on and give it a try. And to be able to show like, and these people have done it and are having a good experience. That was a nice part of sort of that whole cadence. But to your point, I think like the thing I struggle with the most with LinkedIn in general, and I feel like probably most people do, is like it is a very inauthentic place. It does feel like people post their wins and
Yeah.
people post about the grind and like, especially in our world, it's like the 996. Like if I see one more 996 post, I'm gonna lose my mind. But it's like for me, I've always wanted anything I post on there, even if it is a win like that, like it's coming with an authentic voice behind it or a genuine voice behind it about like we are really excited to work with this company and here is why they're cool and here's what they're doing. And my posts outside of that being much more just not necessarily like the most buttoned up or like feeling like a ghostwriter would have written them. It's a little bit more authentic and casual. I think all of that's just like the type of persona that we at StackPack want to be able to offer. Is it isn't like super corporate-y like we are an early stage startup. Our branding is more fun. Like those are all kind of, they all sort of meld together. And in terms of what we've seen out of it, we've definitely seen the partnerships with those brands grow closer. Like anytime you ask a brand, hey, can we post about how much we like your company and what you guys are doing? That just offers a nice little back and forth, but you aren't, again, asking them to try some new product feature or pay you more money for something. It's like, hey, we want to talk about how cool you are. We want to post about you on LinkedIn. We want to get your brand out there. That's a really nice thing to be able to offer. And so I think strengthening existing relationships has been great. And also, like, oddly, on sort of the VC or just the tangential side, like referrers, partners, investors, they see those things, and it gives them excitement to talk about you more. Like, hey, that's right, they are closing new deals, and they're bringing on new business, and they're landing these big logos. That's all very exciting. I do want to help them, or I do want to be a part of this momentum. And so that nudge has also been really helpful, I think, in a way that maybe we didn't necessarily anticipate, but it's definitely a rising tide sort of situation where everyone's starting to feel good about this in a way that feels very authentic, which has been nice.
Yeah, I mean, I can validate from an external perspective. It definitely gives a sense of momentum. And it also does, like, if you are a friend of the business and you want to help support, it is a reminder, oh yeah, those guys are working with these types of companies,
Yeah.
maybe I should make that intro to them and so on. So I think it feeds off your network led approach as well. Talking about brand a little bit, we mentioned Adam O'Brien recently joined. I wanted to dig a little deeper into that partnership and how that's sort of played out, right? Like, what did marketing look like before he was there? Like, what could you guys do without a full-time resource focused on it? And how has that changed? And I also want to tap into your relationship with and how you collaborate with Sarah as the founder, right? Because she comes from somewhat of a sales background. So I imagine some founders, I don't know if it's the case with her, have trouble letting go of the sales motion. It seems like you kind of hit the ground running, and I remember she sent me to you first, right? And like, oh, Mike's got it all, and so on. So it seemed like she actually had an easier time maybe letting go. But yeah, how both those relationships, maybe a little window into how you're working with their marketing counterpart, and then how do you work with Sarah as sort of a sales background founder?
Yeah, we could have a 30-minute pod just on Adam and what he's done. He's the man. So yeah, I think like it goes back to the capacity thing, having an understanding of what you can and can't actually manage, whether it's a vendor stack or a pipeline, and figuring out like what can I actually point my energy towards that's going to make a difference. That was the biggest element of Adam coming on, is like there are things that I was doing at 20% capacity, like a lot of ad stuff, honestly, where we were trying to get a sense for what's resonating. I was designing a bunch of ads and then putting them on LinkedIn and being like, all right, what's the click rate? Are we getting good traction? What are people really resonating with language wise? And you'd spend some time doing that, and then you'd like go into a couple pitches, and then you'd come back, and all of a sudden it's, oh, I got to go to daycare and like pick up my daughter, and I got unplugged for a while. And by the time you get back to it, you're like, okay, I'm trying to re-engineer all of the thinking that I was doing back when I first looked at this LinkedIn ad spend. Having someone like Adam can come in and just have the experience and know-how of like, oh, here's what this stuff actually means, and here's the story it's telling me. But then also do all of the other things that I would have never touched, like things that I never would have for a second considered having capacity for, whether it's Adam or like anyone who's just an expert in this space. It's so nice to just be like, oh, wow, you're pointed in the same direction as me, and your energy is just going to this stuff that like I never would have had time for. That's been really, really helpful. And then I think also just having someone to bounce language off of, like early stages of nothing else, like one very long creative writing assignment where you're like, what's going to resonate? What happens? How do I talk about this product in a different way? And having Adam as someone to be able to talk to about that stuff and generate content of his own for me to come back to and be like, oh, that's a really interesting angle. That's been incredible. I think that's like a massive value unlock for the entire team. So that's Adam. And then from a Sarah perspective, yeah, Sarah had a chance. We worked together. She was an advisor at the last startup I was at. And so I think like, the benefit I had is she saw me be successful and like have wins and know what I'm doing enough to, when I came on here, say like, okay, yeah, go and do your thing and, keep me posted. The thing I told Sarah when I joined is like, I'll run really fast, but I'm going to keep checking in to make sure I'm running in the right direction. Because the thing I don't want to do is run one way and then check in with you next week and you're like, oh God, no, that's not at all what we need. And then it's just undoing a bunch of work. And so with Sarah, a big part of it was just understanding like company direction, where she wanted things to go, where she had a vision for things to go. And then finding within there, like, what are the elements that I can just own myself? What are the elements I need to collaborate with her on? And then what are the things that like, that's Sarah's and that's someone else on the teams. And I won't touch that piece. That was a really helpful starting point. And then like, as you know, having someone who sits on calls with you and can just immediately give you feedback on like, hey, that was really helpful, but like the thing you said here isn't actually relevant to what we do, or hey, I like that wasn't the right answer to this question, and correcting you on a call or being sort of the guide there was so helpful. And so I think Sarah is both just a mentor and the person who's guiding our ship. It's just, you work so closely, and to be able to benefit from something like that is really, really important. I can't imagine having a founder who like wasn't the type of resource that she is, and wasn't as open to being that resource as she is.
Yeah, it sounds like she's walking the perfect balance of being involved enough but not overly involved, which I've seen both sides, where there's founders that are not, like, they hand off to sales and they're engineers maybe, and they go and do their thing, and that's like, they're not involved at all, and that can create some challenges. And then the other one is the sales background founder that's like won't let go of the process, right? So it sounds like she
Yeah.
walks that balance perfectly. Um, we're going to wrap up here quick soon, but I wanted to ask one last question before we do, that I think is a really important part of the founding AE role that most people don't talk about, or that I don't see a lot about. We've talked a lot about tactics and strategies and tools, but there's also the mental side of this thing, right? And just the ability to keep going through rejection, or to not get overly zealous when things are going great, and kind of keep that balance between the ups and the downs. So how do you do that? Like, how do you approach your mindset in this game of startup sales?
Yeah, I also want to hear yours. Mine is, so I think like the learned skill is the short-term memory,
Yeah.
which is bad and good. Recently, we had like the best week we'd ever had at StackPack. Signed a bunch of clients, things were great. The next week, by Wednesday, things had just like very slowly turned down, which is to be expected. Like we were refilling pipeline and all this stuff. And I was fully like, like we're not doing anything. Like you completely
Yeah.
forgot about a week ago. Which, when last week wasn't a great week, that's a great mindset to have. You refocus on the current state. But it's also kind of crappy when it's like, oh man, that was a great week. I would love to be able to like, bask in how nice that was and these new clients and all of this stuff. So I think there's like some positive and negatives on the short-term memory front. But I think the biggest thing for me is like, you have to have stuff outside of work.
Yeah. Totally.
Like there has to be something else to put your energy into that can really just fully unplug you from what you're doing here and put you into something else. For me, I play a lot of soccer. And so like fully getting away from my laptop and screens and like going onto a field and sweating and running and like yelling at people and, having this sort of microcosm of stress and highs and lows. And then that ending is like wonderful. That's to me kind of the perfect thing to get away. And whether it's soccer, getting outside to run or like a hike or whatever it is, I think that piece is like foundational. I'd have a hard time, I think, working with someone in the space who didn't have something outside of work that was just like, oh, I do this thing for fun, or I when I unplug, I go and I do this. It's so critical. Like I mean, we're both family people, so I also know that takes some time away from that piece too. But I'm curious what that looks like on your end.
Yeah, so very similar. I would say I've gotten a lot better at this over the years, in both ways, right? In terms of my mindset in the work, and then also being more balanced outside of the work. So in the work, it's for me, it's a matter of perspective. Like I've done this a couple of times now, so I know the lows won't be low forever and the highs won't be high forever. So it's a matter of just knowing that you need to push through, and that's for me, the best thing is just to focus on the work, right? To be like,
Yeah.
okay, today I'm going to be recording this podcast. Let's do that as best as possible. I need to do some a newsletter article. Let me like focus on that, right? Let me do some outbound. Let me do some product stuff. So it's just focusing on the
Yeah.
work day to day, and having the confidence that if you do the work as best as you can, the outcomes will come, and just kind of taking it one brick at a time, basically. So that's kind of that perspective, I think, has helped a lot. And then you kind of touched on it, but like having two young boys has forced me to like, I have no choice but to think about other things and be engaged in other things. And it's one of those things where when I was having kids, I was like, oh man, how am I going to handle this? Like I'm always so deep in my work. How am I going to be able to balance this? But actually now, having gone through it, it's like, wow, this was the best thing that ever could have happened, because now I'm forced to disengage, and everything that felt so life and death now feels a little bit less like it's a little less harsh, right? It's like,
Yeah.
there's light on the other side. There's more to life than just this, and it's
Yeah.
helped me balance it out. Plus hobbies, like you said, I live in Mill Valley, so there's hiking, there's outdoor
Yeah.
activities. I play guitar, so like taking time to do that and soak into other things. So very similar to you, I would say, is the way that I approach these things.
I love it. I feel like my calling card for this year has been an ongoing battle to maintain perspective.
Yeah.
Perspective is like my word of the year. And I think we're in like having kids or having just like anything that isn't work, if it can offer you that perspective on life, or, the demos you had today or the emails you sent, like that's so critically important in this, because I think you can get so self-important so quickly, and that feels like a recipe for disaster, especially when you're in this type of role. So gaining that or having that in some form or fashion feels like a must. It's at the end of the day, it's a job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Mike, this has been more than I could ask for. As I said at the beginning, like I had you in mind when we were building this podcast, and you definitely delivered so much great learnings here, both on the work and the personal front, on how to manage this crazy roller coaster of a role. For those that are listening and they want to learn more from you, or they, maybe they StackPack has piqued their interest and they want to learn a little bit more about what you guys do and what you offer. Where's the best place for folks to connect with you?
Yes, this is my like hit all my channels thing.
Yeah.
No, stackpack.co is the spot to go learn more about us. You can book a demo. You can sign up for free if you want. Just give it a whirl for 30 days. See how we can help your business. And if you want to connect with me, Mike Jank on LinkedIn. I don't think there are many of us. I actually think it's just my uncle and I. So if there's
Also
an
a Mike.
older looking Mike Jank, that's not me. I'm the younger looking Mike Jank. But yeah, reach out. Let me know. Justin, it's been a pleasure though. I'm such a huge fan of AssetMule. I'm such a huge fan of you and George. So really, really lovely to be able to talk if we do this for another hour.
Awesome. No, this was great, and really appreciate you taking the time to stop by and share your experience with us.
Sounds good. I'm gonna go take my dog for a walk now. She's
awesome.
Buried under my feet at the moment.
Enjoy. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, dude.